is the DeFi Decoded podcast by 9 Point Partners. The ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast should not be taken as investment advice. Always consult with your financial advisor before investing.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of DeFi Decoded. I am Alex Tapscott here with co-host Andrew Young. We've had some terrific guests over the past little while. Last week, we had Sheila Warren of the Crypto Council for Innovation, who really gave us kind of a masterclass on the current state of affairs on the regulatory front of the United States and also what her organization is doing overseas. And next week, we've got some pretty exciting things to share with you from a new guest, which I won't say who it is, but getting deep on the technical side and the Web3 front. But today we're going to have one of our classic Andrew and Alex chat about what's going on in the world episodes. So a little bit of macro, a little bit of news, and some big themes that we're seeing in the market that we think could continue through to the next little while. So Andrew, great to see you, buddy. Let's kick things off with the debt ceiling talks. There's a lot of scuttlebutt out of the US that the government's going to run out of money soon. And somehow stocks are shrugging this off a little bit. The NASDAQ is at its high point since August of last year. The large cap tech stocks, the FANG stocks, have been performing very well in the context of this kind of interesting news. But crypto doesn't seem to be totally participating. We had a great start to the year. Bitcoin, I think, was up to 80% at one point, but it seems to have retraced a little bit, from that 30,000 and change level down to about 27K, which is funny to me because isn't the government running out of money and defaulting on its debt sort of supposed to be the inflection point or kind of killer use case for a sovereign currency that is not controlled by a government? Bitcoin does not have a central bank. It does not have a Treasury Department or Congress that can run out of money. It is all governed by code. So shouldn't this be the moment where it's supposed to shine?
Yeah, I mean, this would be this would be the exact environment, sort of an inflationary backdrop with a debt ceiling that looks increasingly fraught. I think so. Sort of two things there. I think one is it seems like the stock market is, from what I can see, discounting the probability that that there won't be a deal happening. It seems like I've only been following sort of financial markets for 12 years now, and I feel like I've seen this debt ceiling situation happen multiple times now, and it seems to always get resolved at the last second, just because neither party really wants to press the nuclear button and actually have the U.S. default. And so that seems to be partly what's going on there. And then obviously we just had sort of a couple of very deflationary economic indicators come out over the last couple of weeks, like the New York manufacturing yesterday. So I think partly that's just due to stocks pricing in sort of a deflationary environment, and therefore sort of pulling forward both the end of the rate hiking cycle and also potentially rate cuts in Q4. Crypto itself hasn't rallied as much. I think partly just because crypto was rallying quite a bit earlier on, whereas sort of, like you said, and not over the last 30 days, but the 30 days before that, crypto rallied quite aggressively from the lows, whereas the stock market sort of stayed flat. So I think what's happening right now is it's sort of crypto is at this point almost like a forward indicator for the boomer risk on assets, sort of the traditional tech stocks and things like that. That's one sort of potential explanation. So essentially what's happened is crypto just rallies before the traditional sort of high beta tech stocks have rallied. So I think that would be my guess. I also think just crypto in general, we've had some pretty negative catalysts over the last couple of weeks, both on the regulatory side, and then also just there's been a lot of worries that the U.S. government is selling off big tranches of its sort of government-owned BTC portfolio. So we actually had two different scares where Bitcoin went down a couple percent in like essentially within a minute, almost like little small flash crashes, because people were posting on Twitter about how like the U.S. government was selling off large tranches of its Bitcoin portfolio.
But is that real? I've heard conflicting reports about that. Apparently, there's a wallet address that people claim belongs to the government, but that they've been doing this. I don't know. Doesn't it seem a little too good to be true?
Yeah, it does. And actually, I'm actually not sure what happened on the second. So the first sort of rumor about that happening turned out to be false. The second one, which just happened this week, or I guess I should say end of last week, it's actually not clear from what I can see whether it actually was the U.S. government or not, which is funny because we have perfect insight into what's going on chain, but we can't figure out what's going on or like who actually owns these addresses. So I think that's partly it. I think also just not even the fear itself about these or like whether these events happen or not. It's definitely put into the forefront that the U.S. government has said that they're going to be selling off a huge tranche of their Bitcoin portfolio over the next, I believe it was 16 months. So whether this was happened or not, most people from who I've talked to are pretty worried, are very cognizant of the fact that you have essentially a massive forced seller in the market over the next 12 months. So it's very much top of mind. So yeah, I think that's that would be my kind of read on the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so many different factors that are going into the price of Bitcoin right now, just as there are many factors that go into pricing equities. It's, I think, oversimplistic to say that values are based exclusively on the interest rate cycle and the fact that maybe the pause is being pulled forward or even cuts are being pulled forward. There was also a pretty decent earnings season. And, it seems like in general, the China reopening story is providing a bit of a tailwind. So, you taken together, there's certain factors that are kind of coming together. And the same thing is true for crypto. Of course, it's interesting to see how these outside factors weigh on crypto, whether it's the collapse of banks and the questions that people have about custodial financial institutions, or whether it is about governments defaulting on their debt and how that might raise the profile of a self-sovereign kind of money. But there are lots of other things that are going into it. There is the risk of regulation, I think, that people have raised in the US being, of heightened concern. And we heard from Sheila Warren last week about how there does seem to be a real heel turn from a lot of people in government towards a negative position on this. So that's worth considering. It's also worth considering that right now, at least, the Bitcoin network is actually being clogged up with ordinals, with NFTs, which is something I don't want to spend too much time on, but maybe is worth mentioning. Bitcoin is a platform. A lot of people early on had high hopes that it could be used as a programmable platform for value. So you could use the Bitcoin network as a way to program value into any kind of asset, right? You could use the network to move and store assets like securities and money and collectibles and IP and titles and deeds and wedding registrations and so on and so forth. And the network and the people in it basically decided a few years ago that they wanted to keep Bitcoin narrowly defined in terms of what it could and could not do. And what's happened recently is some developers have kind of decided to commandeer some block space and use it to mint NFTs, which are called Ordinals, on the network. Now, from my perspective, as someone who thinks of blockchains as a new medium for value, this is just the Bitcoin blockchain being used as a medium for value of another kind, right? It's being used as a medium for NFTs, which is kind of interesting and cool. If anything, it kind of harkens back to like 2013 days for Bitcoin. But now, of course, people in the Bitcoin community are saying this is not real Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. And the upshot of all of this is that network fees have actually increased. The network itself has become more congested, which you think would be almost a good thing because it's a sign that it has a lot of utility and people have high demand for it. But at least in this case, it seems to be causing some consternation amongst Bitcoin holders that, maybe it's being diluted away from its kind of more pure purpose, right? So I don't really know if that's factoring in on the price. It's all to say that there's just a lot of stuff going on right now in this space, and it's hard to tease out what's the cause and effect and what are the things that are actually driving things forward. Okay, that's enough on the macro front. There was another piece of news I'm eager to get your perspective on, which is that WorldCoin, started by Sam Altman, is planning on raising $100 million or has apparently just raised $100 million. So I want you to give me the background on WorldCoin, because I know it's something that's kind of divided the community, the Web3 community, along, I guess, ideological lines. But it's worth noting that Sam Altman, who's launching WorldCoin and raising $100 million, this is the thing he's probably least well known for. This is the person who was the CEO of Y Combinator, the most famous incubator in the world, whose list of companies include companies like Airbnb, for example, who graduated from it. He's also the founder of OpenAI, and just finished testifying in front of Congress about the opportunities and risks of artificial intelligence. OpenAI, of course, is the creator of ChatGPT-3 and GPT-4, which has completely taken the world by storm and kind of changed how we think about what AI can and cannot do in the world. And now he's got this new crypto project, I guess. So make sense of this for us, Andrew. Tell us a bit about this WorldCoin thing.
Yeah, so I believe Sam actually co-founded WorldCoin, but there's someone else who's the CEO. I can't actually find it. He, I believe, is sort of like an executive chairman or sort of some sort of chairman role. But obviously, by far the most famous co-founder of this project. Yeah, what's interesting with WorldCoin, it's actually been around, I believe, now for over 3 years, it sort of first came to prominence, I believe, 2 years ago when they announced their sort of like seed round fundraise, and essentially the idea is WorldCoin is thought of as essentially a universal basic income for humanity. And the idea is they'll have everyone in the world will get sort of some allocation of this WorldCoin token. And the way that they sort of prove that it's not just the same person getting, multiple different allocations of token, they have to make sure that, each person is provably unique. And so what they do is they created these like basketball-sized orbs, and they essentially just go and scan your irises, so your eyes. And I believe that's actually also how you open the wallet as well. And so your wallet is like provably linked to your biometrics, like your iris. And Sam's actually talked a lot about WorldCoin as sort of the solution to the problems that OpenAI he thinks is going to create. Yeah. So OpenAI, like obviously, I mean, at this point, I feel like everyone in the world knows about OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, just using generative AI to both create images and text, and now increasingly like videos and pretty much everything. Yeah. And so Sam has actually been quite open about the fact that AI is going to create massive disruption and likely put tons of people out of work. And so he thinks the solution to this is like a universal basic income. But rather than sort of trying to create some sort of universal basic income, which is like essentially where everyone receives some set amount of pay, through political means, he wanted to create like a technical solution to UBI, which is actually something that people have been talking about a lot in crypto generally. So the controversy with WorldCoin, just to sort of bring it full circle, is I don't think people in crypto actually have necessarily a problem with the idea of creating like a worldwide UBI using some sort of provable biometric. Mm-hmm. I think the bigger issue is the fact that one is Sam Altman's not really seen as a trustworthy figure, and two is the fact that there's already been murmurings that WorldCoin is not actually going to keep your data private. So the big news of like the last couple of weeks is they're now allowing people to opt out of having their eyeball data be private in return for some reward. So they're sort of already starting to go a little bit back on their promise to keep this, incredibly sensitive iris data completely private. They're now sort of soft sort of soft allowing it to be owned by the sort of the underlying WorldCoin company. And the thing is like in a world with AI, like obviously AI is incredibly, it's all built on data. So I'm not totally sure what value the iris data would have with AI, but data is incredibly important in the age of AI. So this might be like a lot of people are worried that this could create some sort of dystopia where you have predominantly poor countries, people there selling biometric data to get like a crypto coin that may or may not have value, which all feeds back into this like OpenAI like juggernaut. So again, this is sort of, I'm getting more into kind of like the speculative conspiracy theories now, but that's kind of like that. I would say that's kind of sentiment in the crypto sphere about this. What's interesting is Sam been sort of going on a rant here, but Sam's actually openly talked about how he's been surprised by how negative the feedback they've gotten. And so right now they're trying to do sort of a public blitz to deal with a lot of these concerns and try to sort of turn around perception. But I just overall, I would say perception of this project is quite poor in the crypto sphere, and actually in sort of the traditional sphere as well, though obviously the sort of traditional media hates anything to do with crypto. So anyways, that's kind of my read. I'm not sure what you've heard about it, besides obviously the fundraising announcement, but I'm curious what your thoughts are based on this.
Well, I think that people are right to be concerned about how the data might be used and whether or not the company might change its rules to make that data no longer private. After all, it was OpenAI that began as a capped profit company, effectively like a not-for-profit, with a whole bunch of different founders, and then later turned into a for-profit company that is now worth tens of billions of dollars. So the nature of that organization changed, and so it's possible the same thing could happen here. To me, what's interesting is that using a biometric identifier is not in and of itself problematic. It's to your point about who owns that data. And we have the tools to create self-sovereign identities. And we have lots of other devices that require biometrics, thumbprints, or face scans like Apple devices. And people don't seem to have problems with that hurdle either, right? And so I don't know, quite frankly. I don't really understand how you get paid by having a WorldCoin wallet and how the WorldCoin has value. I haven't done enough on the token side to understand the value proposition as AI becomes a bigger part of the economy. And what does that do? Puts people out of work. And so we need a way to support basic income. And so WorldCoin increases in value the more AI gets used. Like, I'm sure this has been explained. So I haven't done the work, but I just don't quite know how that works.
Yeah. So I think, so the idea, I guess the theory is, again, this is just a theory, is like you said, OpenAI has a sort of a unique structure where it's like a capped profit. So any investor can only make 100x what they put in. And that's actually how they also did their deal with Microsoft. So they sold 49% of the company to Microsoft, but Microsoft actually, after they've made, I think it's like $250 billion, they actually relinquished the equity back to the OpenAI Foundation. And so this is the more positive speculative theories, is that what will actually happen is OpenAI will be effectively community owned by WorldCoin holders. So the idea is like OpenAI will end up actually being owned by, like, equally owned by all of humanity, or at least anyone who's had their iris scanned, using like your WorldCoin. Like, so essentially having WorldCoin allows you to get an airdrop of OpenAI. Like that's kind of the theory. Like that's like, in which case that would actually, I mean, a lot of the hate for Sam Altman would be incredibly misplaced, because sort of instead of creating a potential multi-trillion-dollar company, he's essentially allocating it to, the rest of humanity to make UBI possible, which would be pretty, like, I don't know, that'd be one of the craziest things. So anyways, that's kind of the positive theory. The negative theory, which is also very much possible, is that this is just like a very elaborate data harvesting operation, using and sort of bribing people in poor countries to give up their biometric data in return for a yet to be released and highly speculative crypto coin. So we don't know where it falls between those two, between utopia and dystopia. It's somewhere in between, but so that's again, that's the speculative theories on both sides.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I hadn't really fully considered the idea that, okay, an allocation of WorldCoin goes to each member of humanity based on their being a person, right? Like a provable person.
And and that the idea there too is it kind of makes sense. It's not even just like the way I just described it is that would be almost like a donation. So the data, like there's two ways to think about it. There's one way, which is they're using this iris data just to, so it's the only real way that they determine that you can have provable uniqueness, like proof of human, as they call it. So this is like a way to be like, this wallet is for sure only owned by this person. But then there's another theory, which is if AI is like the most important invention, humans have ever created, and data is what powers it, then if biometric data has value in serving this AI, you could create sort of a universal basic income where effectively people are streaming their data to the cloud, and therefore receiving value back for that sort of contribution. So like in that sense, it's not even, they're not using, it's not just there to sort of prove that each human and each wallet is unique to that specific person, but it's also starting down this path where it's universal basic income because it's you're selling your data effectively to get that income, and so in some ways it's not really unconditional. It's more just it's sort of like a hack way around UBI.
It's interesting. It's not like taking a sliver of the total production of an economy and handing out a portion to everyone. It's taking the share of an organization, if it's successful, that everyone will get to have a share of, right? I mean, that sounds basically like what you're saying. It reminds me a little bit about at the end of the Soviet Union, they had this voucher system where basically citizens were allocated vouchers, which kind of gave them a share of a whole bunch of state-owned enterprises. And these people who had no knowledge about how to price or value any kind of asset because they'd lived in this authoritarian communist regime, basically were just like selling all their vouchers for a bottle of vodka or, some money to buy food or something like that. And so these oligarchs, a lot of them members of the former bureaucracy of the Soviet Union, figured out that they could just like round up a bunch of ignorant people and buy off all their vouchers. And then they ended up with like huge shares of these state-owned enterprises. And those people became like the oligarchs we know today in Russia. Anyway, so like you can imagine someone being like, I'm going to round up a bunch of eyeball data, pay each person $100, but the long-term, like the net present value of this, this one person's eyeballs is actually like thousands of dollars or something. And it's another example of a scheme that has good intentions being co-opted. Anyway, we shouldn't only be talking about the downsides and the risks of something like this. Like, it's obviously a very bold and kind of it's a very bold and innovative solution, and the only one that I've credibly seen that tries to actually tackle what, if any, thing we can do about the disruption from AI. So good for it. Honestly, like, I think it's kind of fascinating, but yeah, it's clearly got lots of implementation challenges. Hey, Rob, can you mute your phone, please? You keep coughing into the mic. It's our producer, Rob.
Sorry.
Come on.
Yeah.
That was making a profound point there.
Yeah. No, but yeah, I totally agree with what you said. I think it is like, it is kind of almost like the holy grail of crypto projects is to somehow create a UBI. Just because, so I think the only way this would work, by the way, is I think the WorldCoin by its very nature cannot be transferable. Just because I don't see how that, if we create a world where your WorldCoin is transferable, and then like you need liquidity or something and you sell your WorldCoin, like that's not really UBI. That's just shares in an AI company that some people might not know how to properly value them. And so you get a very similar, exactly like you said. You get some people just sort of either buying them off cheaply or forcibly buying them. And then, you go into a situation like that. I mean, you also go into another situation where if the tokens aren't transferable, I mean, from what I can tell, eyeballs are transferable. So you could, I'm not sure what happened.
Anybody who's seen Minority Report, which apparently you haven't, because we talked about this beforehand, will remember the scene where, spoiler alert, Tom Cruise's character is trying to remain anonymous, and so has his eyeballs swapped out with someone's eyeballs by this like back alley doctor, and that allows him to keep avoiding the thought police who are kind of chasing him through this quasi dystopian future. So anyway, on that light note, no, it's possible. I don't know. We should wait and see on this one, because I think it's something that's kind of fascinating. One final point I'll make, which is that the WorldCoin opportunity to me reminds me of another big trend that's happening in technology, which is that we are entering this sort of new digital age, and there are lots of new technologies that make up that sort of this new era, whether it's AI or blockchain or IoT or biotechnology, or new sources of energy or VR and AR and all these other things. And it strikes me that this is a classic example of the convergence of technologies, or the Trivergence, at least of three: IoT, AI, and blockchain. So you got this IoT device, which you need in order to access a wallet, Web3, which you will earn money from, the disruptive or value capture of AI, all kind of coming together into this one concept, right? And I think we're going to see a lot more projects that merge together some of these different kinds of new technologies. I think that the Web3 world, until relatively recently, has been very focused on token opportunities, and there have been some interesting AI crossovers there. But I think we're going to see more and more of that convergence or that Trivergence as all of these technologies continue to mature concurrently. And so I think WorldCoin certainly won't be the last thing that we see that tries to bring all of this together.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's definitely probably the most ambitious crypto project, and that's probably why it gets a lot of hate. But I think I've actually been, I would say, relative to other people in the community, I've been, I would say, less quickly to judge, just because I'm not totally sure what the master plan is here. Yeah, and I mean, again, OpenAI, they changed to a capped profit structure, so they did sort of go back on a little bit of their founding principles.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, I looked into how it worked, and it does revert into a foundation after a certain level. And again, Sam claims that that's just, they had to give some sort of equity upside to attract, the best machine learning researchers in the world. So
sure. Yeah. Wow.
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we will indeed. We will. All right, that's it for this week's episode of DeFi Decoded. Thanks for joining us. We will be back next week with another great episode. Until then, appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.
The information contained herein does not constitute an offer or solicitation by anyone in the United States or in any other jurisdiction in which such an offer or solicitation is not authorized, or to any person to whom it is unlawful to make such an offer or solicitation. Prospective investors who are not residents in Canada should contact their financial advisor to determine whether securities of the funds may be lawfully sold in their jurisdiction.